Hello and welcome to another James Smiles video. Today we're going to be doing something quite a bit out of the ordinary for this channel, and I've got to admit completely inspired by a friend who you may have even seen on YouTube herself, and that is Louise Hadrill. You can check her out at Louis Poo. She's been making some fantastic content as of late, and yeah, it inspired me to do something a little bit different. Sorry, don't mind me, I'm just pressing buttons on my laptop. But I wanted to try and replicate that authentic commentary experience that Louise has captured for theme parks, just like Louise. So I am copycatting. Welcome to James Copycats. So today I wanted to talk about something very close to my heart and something that I don't feel has enough appreciation from the theme park community, and that is the roller coaster Air. What a fantastic ride. Alton Towers, the UK's premier theme park, has always been at the forefront of innovation. And in 2002, they did something revolutionary. They introduced the world to a brand new way to experience roller coasters. So this is the story of Air / Galactica, but we're going to talk about it as Air because that's what it was first, and that was when it was in its best. It's a story of engineering, it's a story of marvel, and it sparked the imagination of 12-year-old James, if not younger. I mean, just think about it, right? The first roller coaster to allow you to experience the sensation of flying, that does not get enough credit, let's be honest. Who hasn't had a dream where they can fly? So first, a little bit of history. The idea of a flying roller coaster was first imagined back in 1990. But at the time, it was nothing more than a dream. Engineers basically had no way of recreating that experience in a safe way. We have come to love health and safety regulations, especially here in the UK. I mean, thank God. Not that they protect you from every kind of accident, but we have them. But back then, they just couldn't do it. It was not possible, or at least that's what they thought. Now, some of you may know this, but actually the first flying roller coaster does have a different title, and it opened in Granada Studios in Manchester, and it was called Skytrack. So that opened in 1997, and as you can see, it's not exactly revolutionary technology, but for its time, and especially for its place, and I highly recommend you go and watch some videos about this right out, it was a really interesting concept. Unfortunately, because of the type of roller coaster that it was, if we can call it that, it wasn't able to have the inversions and the track layout that we can imagine today. And especially, most important, it could not hold the capacity like a big theme park that Alton Towers would need. So, whilst it was novel, it was slow, it was cumbersome, it didn't have a high capacity, and it just wasn't going to work for Alton Towers. But then, in the very late 90s, Swiss manufacturer Bolliger & Malabar, you might have heard of them, a firm known for their smoothness and their grandiose, were determined to create a flying roller coaster. Now, let's go back over to the UK. Our boy John Wardley, who we all know and love very well, after the success of Nemesis and Oblivion, and let's be honest, it's pretty hard to top Nemesis and Oblivion, and some might argue that this definitely didn't top it, but he and Alton Towers approached B&M with this concept of a brand new world's first ride, and thankfully, because B&M was so excited about creating a brand new ride concept themselves, the two were a match made in heaven. So this all happened in 1998, and you can just imagine being in those discussions. I mean, as someone who's read John Wardley's books, that's given me a lot of info, but I would just love to be a fly on the wall during those early conversations about brand new ride concepts and design. I mean, it must have been such an exciting and unique job to have. I mean, what a life he lives, that guy. And all of the people surrounding it. I wish I knew more about the manufacturer, and if in the future decide to make more videos like this, we'd definitely do a deep dive into those sorts of things, because those internal conversations and the development of these kinds of rides, that is very interesting. So, whilst these guys were talking, the biggest challenge that they had to face was how the hell are they going to get the people from a sitting position into a flying position? And I challenge you, I mean, obviously you know now, but create a new ride concept in your head where you've got to do that. And just think about the kind of complexity that comes with it. And so they had a couple of early designs. They thought of one where the riders would be tilted mid-ride. Kind of a bit like Fly, I think, but probably they had no idea of how to make that a concept. in all fairness, B&M did a great job with the result of their flying model. So in the end, they obviously decided on the system that we know and love today, where they would start off in the seating position and then be rotated to a prone position, which, little bit of information here, I think this is quite 50-50. Some people absolutely hate that motion and some people love it. Now, one thing I think we can all agree on is that Air is such a comfortable ride, or Galactica, sorry, I will refer to it as Air during this video, until we get to the end. But yeah, it's extremely comfortable. I think it was even more comfortable when I was smaller. But I think the whole experience of getting into the seat and being lifted into a flying position, the novelty hasn't worn off on me, and I still like it very much. Feels slightly more awkward than it did when I was younger, but definitely unique. So then that was it. This ride, set to being Alton Towers' next big thing, certainly had to live up to its reputation. We've got Oblivion and Nemesis before this ride, so quite a lot going on at the park already, which has been held in a really high regard. So they had to come up with a name for the ride, and this is where they decided on Air. Some of you might not know that it's actually an acronym for Aerial Inverted Ride, so super creative. Unlike the intense looping coasters that Alton Towers already had, Air was designed to be a more graceful, freedom kind of a ride experience. And that would also allow it to be a stepping stone between rides like the Runaway Mine Train and Nemesis. And if we look at the future, if we look at the present day, actually Alton Towers has chosen this path more and more. So with 13 and Wicker Man, it's that kind of mid-ground ride, so that the families can come and bring their children, and more of them can ride the same rides. It's closing the gap, and I think Air was the first great example of that, because for me, for example, I think I remember it being my first major roller coaster at Alton Towers, because it still feels like you're going on an epic adventure, and it's big, and you look at it and it's got the same presence in its area as all of the other rides do, except from there's that friendly feeling to it, and I think it's all down to the theme. So with Air, with this airy gracefulness, as John Wardley said, it's inviting, it invites you in. It's not like this scary, horrible environment. And Louise, actually, on Louis Pooh's channel, touched on this really well about 13. And 13 actually is probably more of a family-friendly ride experience, except from the theming is at a point where it's turning those kinds of some of those kinds of people away. And it's all down to the theme, you see. If it's inviting, you're going to go on it. You weren't just riding a ride, you were flying. You were really flying. So for those of you who have not been on Air, and I can't imagine anybody watching this YouTube channel who hasn't, let's just talk about the journey, okay? So you're in this space-age station, which is minimalistic yet industrial. There's an airy soundtrack, which is like very chill zone. There's blue lights over the track and the station. You get into this seat and it's cozy and secure, and you're wrapped inside of it. And then you're lifted from a sitting position into a prone position, and it very slowly leaves the station. And it's almost like the trains themselves are like big manta rays of the sky, and it's such an experience. It really captivates the imagination. And so when you're lifted into that lying position, you go through a tunnel, which we'll get to it, but yes, it's a mess now. Through the tunnel into a chain lift hill, and round a corner at the top of the hill into the ride. After a dip to the right and a swoop into a large drop, that's when we get to this element, the fly to lie. The track twists onto its back, and then you're stuck there with the gravity pushing down onto you. It's a really big chunky bit as well. I mean, everyone knows the bit I'm talking about. And then you're switched back onto your front. And I mean, come on, experiencing that for the first time. This is why this ride just needs more love. It's such a unique position for your body to be in, and it feels amazing. I think it's often overlooked that this is a whole new riding experience for a roller coaster. So you've got so many roller coasters that do the same thing, basically, in a concept. They go up the hill, and then you sit on top of the track, and you go around, and you go in a loop. But, I mean, to this day, Galactica remains unique in that sense, if it's the only thing you can go on in the UK. with an element like a fly to lie, and you've got to admit it's a really cool way to ride a roller coaster. The ride finishes with a series of turns and dips before gracefully coming into the brake run before entering the station again. Like I said, for many guests, this roller coaster was their first big ride. Air's ride system in itself actually was a massive feat of engineering for the time. The harnesses, of course, had to be specially designed. The system that lifts the ride into the flying position, it was a huge feat of engineering, and something that again I just think should be appreciated more. Next time you go into the station, please just admire what the ride does, as it takes you from that seated position into the prone position. You can actually you can watch it and see, and if you look up at the track, you can see how much is really going on up there. And for me, I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I ain't got no information about the engineering because I'm not an engineer, but I'm just someone that can go, oh, that looks cool, and you can see it's impressive. So, just like many other of the Alton Towers rides at the time, before Air was called Air, it was a secret weapon, and to be specific, it was Secret Weapon 5. The park launched a massive advertising campaign for Air, including a 5-year sponsorship with Cadbury's Heroes, believe it or not. And let's not forget Air's super cool slogan, "Assume the position." Again, the advertising here was dreamlike. It was meant to make you feel like it's something that you've seen in your dreams. There was, as you can see here on the screen, the people riding the ride, and then they would take off and fly above these mountains. And yes, it's very 2000s, but it still captivates me to this day. It's an absolutely amazing advert. I think as far as advertising goes, this one in particular really captures what the ride experience is like. And who doesn't want to feel like they're flying? When the ride officially opened on March 16th, 2002, it was a massive success. In fact, on Air's opening day, some guests were lying on the grass outside the ride pretending to fly. They went bonkers for it. Not quite as mad as Smiler fans wearing the uniform to the park, or potentially Nemesis fans wearing Nemesis alien headbands and screaming at the top of their lungs and roaring like an alien creature. No, but something a little bit more chilled out than that, which matches the ride's demeanor. Now, personally, one thing I really wanted to mention in this video was that the soundtrack for Air was just absolutely fantastic. I think one of the key elements that made Air so immersive was the soundtrack. It was made by a gentleman called Ian Habgood, and it was basically a chill out. It was basically chill out music, but using the park's sound system in the queue line with the bass that they provided, it really just got you in the chest, and it completely summed up the ride in a musical sense. It just perfectly captured the ride's theme of weightlessness, tranquility. It just seemed to capture the ride's demeanor completely. It's perfect. I mean, just take a listen for yourself. I mean, those soft synth melodies just almost capture this dreamscape, and the ride helped to relax its ride. The ride soundtrack helped to relax its riders in the queue line, and completely immersed you in the story that it was trying to tell. Which again completely contrasts even most modern roller coasters that I can think of right now. I mean, for the ride soundtrack to chill you out and relax you is the polar opposite of pretty much any other ride at the park. Nothing does that. It's a completely different take, and I think it should be valued for what it is. Now, I think the problem that people have with remembering Air is this giant elephant in the room that we haven't spoken about yet. But I know just the man for that. In order to cover this next bit about Air, I think we need help. So I'm going to call someone very special to the channel, Mr. Dan Bannon. Bear with me.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know about you, Jazz, right? But Louise, she's coming out with such amazing content at the moment. But James's upload schedule is just terrible. Like, he never uploads, but he's meant to be the big YouTuber here. Like, I just... Can you hear that? Sounds like... Ah! The Viking drinking horn is ringing. Better find out who it is.
Hello, Dan.
Hello?
Yes.
Yep, speaking. Hi.
Sorry to call you out of the blue, mate.
Yeah?
I'm just filming a YouTube video about air.
Yeah. Well, James, you know me. I absolutely love your upload schedule, man. It's so... It's just, you never fail to disappoint.
I was wondering if you'd take over and finish the video and talk about...
No, I'd love to be involved in your video,
you know,
man. I'll be right there. Perfect. Sorry, everyone. I'm back. So, carrying on from what James said. In June of 2015, the fate of this roller coaster would change, as Alton Towers submitted planning applications to make major changes to the station as well as the merchandise building for Air. And for the first time in over 13 years, the state of this ride was going to be changed into something completely new. Completely decked out with a new photo opportunity next to the ride's brake run, the entire ride area was to be filled with a new lease of life, including additional theming and also enclosing the station with new walls. Over in Germany, a popular theme park called Europa Park had been entertaining peckish guests with their innovative restaurant concept known as Food Loop. This had proven to be a successful move for the park, and it was this concept that Alton Towers adopted to be placed in the old air shop. The plan was to create a themed environment showcasing the history of the park's unique lineup of roller coasters, fit with a lighting show, themed audio, and decorations as well. But the main draw for this restaurant was not any of this. It was actually the meters of twisted roller coaster track that would go all the way from the kitchen at the top of the building down to the tables where paying guests would be sat. And so the roller coaster restaurant at this point was born, a brand new concept to the UK and something that we'd actually taken from a very successful concept over in Germany. So the entirety of the Air site was now a place of transition and change. What stood for over a decade without any adjustments or additions was now being overhauled to the point in which buildings were being used for different purposes and new structures were being erected. But why? Well, in October of 2015, in the height of the park's Halloween event Scarefest, Alton Towers released some posts telling guests to prepare for new flight and watch this space, which sparked an abundance of excitement and speculation from us, which were the weird teenage freaks that the park, quite frankly, loathed. On the 12th of January 2016, definitely I'm not reading that from the script that I wrote, 3 days before my 15th birthday, Alton Towers Resort congregated their teams down to the London Science Museum, and they had their spacesuits on and their novelty freeze-dried astronauts ice cream packets in hand to announce to the world that from March that year, Air was no longer going to be called Air, but it was going to be called Galactica. This would be an outer space expedition to different planets in a new state-of-the-art spacecraft that would be taking off from a new spaceport that was conveniently located in the middle of nowhere in the butt crack of Staffordshire. But it wasn't the name change that actually hit the headlines of Theme Park Worldwide, the show at the time, but instead it was the fact that this would be the first roller coaster fully dedicated to virtual reality. So on the 24th of March 2016, the aforementioned strange, overstimmed teenagers with a group of old enthusiasts wearing original 1994 Nemesis t-shirts and the general public who genuinely believed that this was a brand new ride marched down to Forbidden Valley to be met with Air with VR, Galactica. The VR on the ride was absolutely revolutionary. For the time, it was fantastic. We hadn't seen anything like it in Europe other than Alpine Express at Europa Park, which wasn't actually built for VR. They just added it on retrospectively. And it was honestly quite enjoyable, but there was a general sense of discomfort amongst various critical groups of guests. Some would say that the headset would shake, causing the footage to be blurry or dislodged and distorted, whereas others would claim that despite being a fun gimmick, the VR took away from the true and traditional purpose that John Wardley intended, in that your eyes were meant to see the landscape drifting past you as you embraced in your simulated flight. A lot of traditional roller coaster enthusiasts felt like the VR took away from the exhilaration of a perfectly good roller coaster. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion. Whether you like it or not, you're getting Dan's opinion, so settle in and enjoy. Air was a coaster that welcomed all ages to tackle a fear that so many of us hold. It combined a large roller coaster with a tranquil and soothing experience to encourage younger guests, or maybe just more timid guests, to get on a roller coaster and actually try it out. When they introduced Galactica with its intense, but may I add it, chef kiss beautiful theme music and the relatively intimidating theming element of the portal, it manipulated what Air had into something that would have been perfect on any other coaster, just in my opinion, not this one. That being said, I think that the VR was very enjoyable on a cold autumn night where the biting, freezing cold was on your face and on your hands, and you were zooming through space. It was a very immersive and beautiful experience. I see genuine benefits in both forms of the ride. However, and I will say this is a big however, when the VR was removed in 2018, the benefits that Galactica had were also removed, and it became Air, but without that relaxing and remedial theme and soundtrack. And to see the ride area become quite dirty in recent times, it's quite sad. If you were to ask me which I prefer, of course I'm going to say Air. It was a major coaster that encouraged people to embrace their anxiety of getting on the ride by portraying a scene of light and relaxation, which no other coasters at Alton Towers, Thorpe Park, Blackpool ever did. They always made it very, very scary, dark. Air was not that. Air was the complete opposite of that. Air basically was, this ride is a relaxation and fun experience. And when people found their Hyperia fearless on Air, it would allow them to open up the possibilities of going on these other roller coasters in the park, like Nemesis and Oblivion. Maybe it's just nostalgia, but Air, for me, for so many years, was my favourite roller coaster at Alton Towers. And so many other people had that exact same opinion. It's universally loved and always will be. So despite you still living on in your current form, we love you, but we will never forgive you for that god-awful, unthemed tunnel with the damp, mouldy crash mat underneath. Set a wrong precedent. So in summary, we love you, Air, we like you, Galactica, and we adore you, James Smiles. Goodbye!